but I was very, very excited to come today for a number of reasons. One, I am a Bill Clinton admirer, follower. I've admired the work he's done in his post-presidency as much as I did during his presidential time. So I was thrilled to be able to come in and actually visit the Clinton Library. We were walking through it with Bob, and he said to me that many of the kids we're in the section where they have the dates for each year of his presidency. And Bob said the kids like to look it up by their birthday. And we're standing right in front of 2000. And I said, well, I went to a state dinner in 2000, and I was looking at the picture of King Mohammed, and I was like, this might have been the one I was at. And then we looked it up, and the only way I knew for sure was I saw that Earth, Wind, and Fire had performed. So then I knew I had been there. But it's a gorgeous library, so you are really blessed in this community to have such a wonderful establishment in your community. I'm also very thrilled to be here because I have to tell you, I grew up daughter of a baseball player, but my father retired when I was 6 years old. And that's when he came home to be with us, since we had dinner together every night, or most nights when he wasn't traveling. But I remember intimately the moment my father got a call from the Little Rock Nine. Because my brothers and I, we were each integrating our own schools, but our experience was completely different than what was happening with the children in the South. And my father got up from the table and he came back and he said, can you imagine those children think of me as an inspiration? And so I have had a connection. I've been so proud of, over the years, I've met a few of the Little Rock Nine, and I've just met Phyllis. Where's Phyllis? Oh. Phyllis Brown, her sister was Minnie Brown. So I've had connections with them, and I just have to tell you, as a child, I thought they were absolutely amazing. In fact, when my father told me the whole story, and we were watching it on television, and then after they called, and then I realized I couldn't say one word about the fact that kids asked me if I bathed. It seemed so minor in comparison to what was happening with the children in the South, and I was really proud of them, and they became my inspiration. So today is a special day for me. I'm one of 3 children. I have a brother, David. He's my younger brother, but he lives in Tanzania, East Africa. And you will be introduced to him both in illustrations and in photos in a few minutes. And I had an older brother named Jackie Jr. who died. Jackie died when he was 24 years old. He died in a car accident. And so it's been David and I that have, and my mother, because my father died when I was 22, a senior in college. So I've spent as many years with just my mother and my brother David as I did as our full family. But we grew up on the East Coast, and my mother still lives kids often ask me if my mother's alive, and I always smile because, you know, my mother is so alive. She's 88, but she's like, I mean, she's not even 88 yet. She's turning 88 in a few months. But she's just the most amazing young woman. Her only problem has been a bad fall 2 years ago that has created problems with her shoulder, but she is quite amazing. So I will see her, when I leave here, I go to the Negro League Museum, and then I will see my mother and spend a week with her. So today we're going to do a couple things. One, I want to spend a little bit of time with you talking about, I am a children's book author. I have written 2 adult books, but I have, since I started working for Major League Baseball, we have a curriculum that's in schools all over the country. That started me writing for children, and I just love the audience, so I've continued to write for children. Now, Testing the Ice is actually my first picture book, and I have 3 coming out in a row of picture books, and I love the genre and cannot wait. I'm supposed to be writing a novel, and all I can think about is Lyric, who is this bird with yellow feet in my community that I'm determined to write a story about. Because I just love the picture book. The picture book is, everything's so immediate. So one of the first things I learned, because when you shift genres, there's always a learning curve. And with the picture book, one of the things I learned was that it has to be told in the moment. So for Testing the Ice, instead of it being my favorite childhood memory, which I had told a number of times, I got to be the 5-year-old who's asking her daddy, can she go ice skating once again? And just remembering every sound and every moment and what it felt like and what it must have felt like for my father. And I love this book because it's not only the story of him testing the ice, which is so powerful, it also allowed me to introduce my father to a younger generation of kids. So both as a dad and also as a baseball player. So I'm going to walk you through some of the slides. I'm glad there are some children here today because I think you'll like the pictures. The artist for testing the ice is Kadir Nelson. Do you guys know Kadir Nelson's work? Okay, you must, yeah. He's an incredible, incredible young man, and the way he paints he paints oil on paper, but first he draws with a pen. No, first, I mean, he does all his research, and he models for himself. Artists either model for themselves or they hire models to be their, in fact, I did one book with an artist, and he hired the wrong model for my mother. She was much too heavy for my mother. My mother's very sensitive, because she will not allow herself to eat bread since she was 25, which she reminds us all the time. So I had to say to him, listen, you have got to change this. My mother was about a size 8. So please, because I would never have heard the end of it. But Kadir sort of uses himself, and he puts on outfits, and it's really funny to hear him talk about it. But he starts off with pencil and paper, and then he seals into pencil with watercolors, and then does oil painting over it. So, we just had a great time working together. We had done a couple of he'd done the cover of a couple of my novels. And then I sort of worked up to, can we now do a picture book? And Scholastic, my publisher, was thrilled, and so was Kadir. So it worked out well, that this book, as you will see from the art. Now there's a clicker, I believe right here. Okay. I'm not the best technician. So, testing the ice takes place in 1955. And 1955 was a big year for us, for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and also for my family. That year, the Brooklyn Dodgers finally beat the New York Yankees after competing against each other for 4 years in a row. So do we have some Brooklyn people here, or is this just, oh, really? Ah, good, okay. And so it was, in game 1 of the World Series, my father stole home, and he stole home against Yogi Berra. So Yogi, to this day, says he's out, and to this day we say he's safe. And it's been a joke, and recently Bob Dupay, who's president of Major League Baseball, came up to me and said, well, Sharon, I must tell you that we reviewed the tapes, and he was truly safe. But we agreed we would not tell Yogi. Let him have his fun. So this is showing my dad was, as you may or may not know, was known for stealing home, and he continues to hold the record. He stole home 19 times in his 10-year career with the Brooklyn Dodgers. So this is a way for me to sort of introduce his fast running. He's coming down the third base line, and you see the catcher. And does the catcher have the ball yet? Any of the kids see the ball? No. Jackie's coming up on that base. He slides, his foot hits the base. The catcher, Yogi, has got the ball, but my father's foot hits the base before Yogi tags him. There's Yogi in the background. He's not very happy. Now, Kadir had this series of photographs to work from, and watch what he did. That same year, my parents moved from our home in New York to a home in Stamford, Connecticut. And there's an interesting story about this because it was in 1955, 56. And my father wanted to have a house where they had land and privacy, because by now he's famous and people just would stop by and talk to us, and we just had no privacy in our house in Queens. So he wanted a house with privacy, and it had to be within an hour of New York City because he was still playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So he went looking for property, but no one would sell to him, because in Stamford, Connecticut, where he was looking, they had redlining. So every time they'd find a property that they wanted, it would be off the market. So a woman in the community, Andrea Simon, heard about this, and she said, call together ministers and community activists and real estate brokers, and said, not in my community. And as a result of that, she said, find the Robinsons the exact property they want, and they did. And luckily, it was a house that had the foundation already built, and this house is on property that had tons of large boulders. So they actually used some of the boulders in the building, and there's actually our game room. The boulder was so big they couldn't move it, so they built the wall around it. So it was a very, say, a custom house. In fact, the house is no longer there. And I went by to see, my mother can't go by, but I went by to see, and they divided the 6 acres into 3 2-acre plots and put 2 other houses on. And they took our main house, there was only one house on the property, took our house, and they took off the top and built 2 stories above. They couldn't even remove the foundation. So yes, we are still landmarked, half the house, the stone is there, but otherwise it is a new property. So this is my brother, I guess there's a pointer on this. Yes, good, Kadir would tell me that. This is my brother Jackie, that's my dad, of course, that's me, and that's my brother David, and that's my mother Rachel. My father was born in Cairo, Georgia, and he was one of 5 children. His mother and father were sharecroppers, and his grandparents were slaves. His father walked off of the farm when my father was 6 months old, and therefore his mother was one of the early, migrated early in that whole migration where the blacks were moving from the South to the Midwest, and also they were moving out west. And my grandmother went west with her 5 children because she had 4 boys. And in Georgia, in the South during that time, it was called the Bloody Summer. It was so many lynchings. And she could not manage the farm, raise these children, and keep her boys safe. So she chose to go to Pasadena, California, where she had her brother lived. They traveled by train. So my dad really grew up in Pasadena, California. My mother was born in Los Angeles and grew up in Los Angeles. This gentleman is nodding to everything. I say, oh, all right. My parents actually met at UCLA. My mother was a freshman, she was a nursing student, and my father was a senior. So she at first thought she wasn't going to like him because my mother is very hard on people that are arrogant. And she had heard he was the big man on campus, but it turns out he was a nice guy. So they met and fell in love. But it was sort of interesting, even before my father got to Pasadena, they saw the signs of him being a great athlete. When he was in preschool, his sister, who was taking care of him until she went to school, then my grandmother sent my father with his sister to school because she had no one to take care of my father. So my aunt would put my father in the sandbox outside of her classroom and tell him to stay there. Luckily, it was California, the weather's decent. So the principal obviously is not happy with this situation, so she calls my grandmother in, and my grandmother says, well, that's fine, I just would have to quit working and go on welfare. So the principal said, we'll work it out. So my father ended up going to school with with his sister. But what they found out very early was when they would come out to play, they realized that my father had this talent, even as a preschool. And the kids would literally give him their lunch if he would be on their team. So we saw that even more so when he went on to college. So at Pasadena City College, he beat his brother Mac's broad jump record. He was named most valuable player on football squad. And he was named the greatest base runner on a junior college team by sports writers. He then went on to UCLA, where he was the Pacific Coast. He led the Pacific Coast in basketball scoring. He was a national champ in the long jump, an All-American halfback in football, and a varsity baseball shortstop. And he was the first UCLA athlete to be lettered in all 4 sports. They describe, going in the springtime, going from a track meet to a baseball game, and my father's changing uniforms in the car because he had to get there in time for the game. So he was a serious athlete, and that's when my mother met him. And they fell in love and got engaged while my mother was still in college. So that's a little bit of background on my family. I'm sorry I got off the track here for a minute. So we're back to our house in Connecticut in 1955. This is the house after we just finished building it. And we hadn't planted all our trees. What I loved about this property is that my parents, it was our property. And so we actually literally planted all of our trees and watched them grow up over the years. And we had to pull all the weeds, and my father's job was to cut the grass. So we all had a family activity, and this is it as it grew up. Now, once again, Kadir had this to work from. And he was absolutely correct. It had the best light, especially in the afternoon, because I told him we used to watch sunsets from the big rock in the back. And he found that light and just brought it to life. So I want to introduce my brothers and all of us from the face forward. So that's Jackie, that's me. This is David's handiwork. So you can see my brother David is the little clown in the family. And we moved into this neighborhood which was all white. And we were very lucky. Some people moved out because they had a black family move in, but most people stayed, and right away we met friends. And they were our very, very best friends, and they were our very best friends until it came to high school. And at that point, then blacks and whites separated, and Christy and I had to separate. So this is Christy, who you're going to hear about in the book, and that's me, and that's her brother Danny, and that's her brother Willie. We had at the lake on our property started on our property and went all the way down the road. And it was a source of great pleasure and great fun. But no matter what we did, my dad would never go in the water. And unfortunately, you heard the punchline, but we will forget we didn't hear it. That's what I always tell the kids that have read the book first. Don't mention it. We act like we don't know why he won't go into the water. My dad he was competitive no matter what he did. And so when we played Monopoly or we played baseball on the front lawn or we played football, we played. We played hard and we learned how to, it was a game. And so this is us playing Monopoly with my dad. It was, our house was a gathering point for our family and our friends. That's again Kadir's artwork. It was funny because I received the art and I was like, Kadir, there were 3 boys and 2 girls. So we had to quickly, Danny got eliminated. And so I learned, another thing when you're writing, another book I did, my editor calls me, she says, Sharon, the sisters, Steve's sisters really don't contribute much to this book. And it's because it's a short format, you have to cut people. And I was like, oh boy. So I cut Steve's sisters out and I called Steve up nervous. He said, fine, as long as you didn't cut me out, it's fine. So, same thing with Willie. He was like, as long as I'm in and Christy's in, that's fine. Danny won't mind. So my dad played when he left UCLA, going back with history, I apologize, he joined, no, I take it back. When he left UCLA, he applied for jobs, but he got a job in the Army. He was drafted. My dad was stationed in Fort Hood, Texas, where he went to officers candidate school. And while he was there, he was court-martialed for refusing to move to the back of the bus. And he had to defend himself in court because his defense was that the bus was still on the Army base when he got on it and sat down. He was talking to a woman that he knew who happened to be a light-skinned black woman, but the bus driver assumed she was white. So he tried to get my father to move the back of the bus. They got into an argument. My father got arrested, and then he had to defend himself in court. So at Fort Hood, he goes to court, defends himself, and wins and is discharged honorably. When he left the Army, he had an opportunity to teach at a college in Texas for 1 semester. And while he was there, he tried out for the Negro Leagues for the Kansas City Monarchs. So this is him, and right next to him, you would probably recognize this man. I hear whispers, Satchel Paige. Right, he was a great pitcher. So they actually played together. The other players, Kadir just made faces, and is nobody particularly recognizable. So my father was playing for Kansas City Monarchs when he was approached by Branch Rickey scouts. And the scouts were looking, they didn't know, the Negro Leaguers assumed that Branch Rickey was going to start another black league, another Negro league. When truth was, Branch Rickey was looking for a pioneer to break the color barrier. speak for just 2 minutes on Branch Rickey. Branch Rickey was an innovator. He was a very good businessman, and he knew there was too much talent in the Negro Leagues to ignore. It was during the time when many of the players, seasoned baseball players, were overseas during World War II, and he wanted to tap into this Negro League source of talent. He wanted to win games. He was also a very ethical man. He was a very strong Christian. He had written into his contract that he would not be on the ball field on Sundays. He was very religious. So when he sent his scouts out, he was looking for somebody, not only the greatest talent, someone that had strong talent and who he felt could manage the major leagues, but he wanted to make sure it was someone that could do it in spite of the pressure. So he saw a number of things he liked about my father. I told you about the court-martial. He was college educated. He played on integrated teams at PCC and at UCLA. He had been in the Army. He defended himself. So Branch Rickey liked the fact that he was outspoken, was known to have a temper, but was also very committed to fighting for justice and had demonstrated that. So Branch Rickey decided the only way he could kind of know that he would know for sure was by bringing Jackie Robinson in for a meeting. And it was a face-to-face meeting that happened on October 25th October 28th in Brooklyn, New York. And at that meeting, Branch Rickey role plays with my father. He plays a really racist fan, threatening Jackie Robinson, and he plays a player that spikes him with his metal cleats as he's sliding into second base. And my father's sort of sitting on his hands and saying, "What do you expect from me?" And Branch Rickey was saying, "I expect for you to play great baseball, but to not fight back with your fists or with words, at least for the first 2 years." So this piece of art is actually one of my favorites of Kadir because I feel like he's so captured the tension between these two men. And Branch Rickey this is a historic meeting. Those times, black and whites did not sit down and negotiate a contract together. Not to mention the fact they're breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball. So everything about it was historic, and each of these men were going to be taking a risk, and their families were concerned, and so this was serious business. And Branch Rickey had studied this and had orchestrated it, and he wanted it to be, he wanted them to be successful. And my father took it very seriously as well. And at the end, my father says, "I'll do it." So my father goes on to play for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and everything that Branch Rickey had predicted happens, and it happens in his first season while he's playing for Montreal, the Royals, and it happens when he moves into the Dodgers. So what happens in the first season Dad played for the Montreal, when they were in Montreal, it was actually great. The people in Montreal really accepted them and welcomed them, my parents, and they enjoyed living up there and enjoyed playing ball up there. When they traveled in the South in particular, they had to deal with, and also, not so South. Philadelphia was one of the worst experiences they ever had in baseball. So it was, when they were out on the road, they had mixed experience. I'll give you one example. They started off in their spring training, and they got to Florida. It was hard traveling to Florida. They get to Florida, and they were supposed to play in Sanford. The team was supposed to play in Sanford for a while, and they get to Sanford, and my father and mother are at the house because they couldn't stay in the hotel where the other players were staying. They had to stay in private homes. So they get to the house, and they're sort of settling in for a minute, and they get word that they have to leave immediately because there was a mob on their way over, and that they were not going to let them field a black and white team. So they literally had to get in a car, get out of town, and go to Daytona, where they ended up playing their spring training in Daytona, Florida. And Daytona, Florida, has a stadium named after my father, and has really done a lot with their history because they're so proud that they, came through when their neighbor Sanford did not. So my father, my father is telling our friends this story. In our house, we had a trophy room, and on our way to the trophy room was on the way to our playroom, and so our friends always stopped to study everything. And so they were more fascinated in the story than my brothers and I were, because, you know, for us it was mostly, you know, when is he coming home? So this is, Kadir once again just captured the faces of the children listening to my father tell this story. So they came out of the Montreal team with a very successful year. My father won the batting championship with a .349 average. He scored 113 runs. He ranked second in the league in stolen bases, and the Montreal Royals won the pennant and the Little League World Series. So now the 1947 season starts, and the Dodgers are playing the Montreal Royals in an exhibition game. And during that game, my father hits into a double play in the 6th inning, and right after my father hits into that double play, they send around an announcement saying that the Dodgers have bought my father's contract from the Montreal team, and he'll be playing for the Brooklyn Dodgers. So April 15th, which we are about to celebrate, marks the day that my father officially put on the Brooklyn Dodger uniform for the first time and played in a non-exhibition game. And they played on a day that, you know, it was nothing ceremonial about his playing that day, but just the fact that he was successful and made it through the day has made it so special. And just keep in mind, that was before Truman integrated the armed forces, before Brown v. Board of Education. So this is really, truly historic. And the reason why there was so much pressure put on baseball to change was because baseball was considered the America pastime. So there's a lot of people that pressured Major League Baseball to integrate. And it came from the media, from sports writers, from ministers, from the rabbis. It came from all different segments of the population. And they felt that because basketball and football were also segregated, but baseball, because of what it symbolized, it was important that they integrate. My father was actually 28 when he entered Major League Baseball. So that's you know, older, because players now start at 18, 19, some right out of college at 20. By the end of his first year, my father led the league in stolen bases and in sacrifice bunts. He was second in runs scored. He played in 151 of the 154 games that season, and he brought a new aggressive style to Major League Baseball, some of which he had learned in the Negro Leagues and some of which were just part of his style. At the end of that first season, he was named the Outstanding Rookie of the Year. So today, it was the first time they awarded a Rookie of the Year award, and today the award it's given to a player in their first year of play, and today it's called the Jackie Robinson Rookie of the Year Award. Going on, so my dad's telling this whole story. My father ended up playing for 10 years for the Brooklyn Dodgers. What was sort of amazing was at the end of his 10th season, the Dodgers traded him to the New York Giants. And the Giants were our hated team. So it was a double insult. So my father played it off and said, fine. When they called, he said, fine, I'll give it all I can give. But he had been negotiating with Chock full of Nuts and with Look magazine. I always get Look and Life mixed up. And so Look magazine was going to break the story of his retirement, and Chock full of Nuts had hired him to be a vice president for personnel. So my father, in January, the article comes out, and the response from the sports writers was Jackie Robinson leaves baseball in the same rhubarb he entered. They were not happy with him because he didn't tell them the story. He gave it to a more commercial magazine. So my father went on and did retire in 1956. So now that it's 1956 and we have Dad home, we've had this nice fall with him, and the winter of 1956, 55, take that back, it was 55, we corner him in the living room while he's reading his paper next to the fire and say, can we go ice skating? And my father looks up at us and he says, what did your mother say? And we say, she said, we can go as long as you go with us. So my father agrees. I love to pause this for a moment. What do you, does he look happy? No, no, he doesn't look too happy. How does he look? How does he look? Oh, and what was that face? I don't want to do this. That's great. Yes, he has that look. I don't want to do this, but I'm going to do it because I want it to be safe for you. So we get Dad to put on his big black rubber boots and his coat, and we're standing there very eager to go out on the ice. And I'm going to pause and read just a touch from this book, and then we'll have time for question and answers. When we reached the edge of the lake, Dad turned to us and said, "Wait!" Jackie, David, Willie, Christy, and I came to an abrupt halt. Then he ran to the house and returned with a shovel and broomstick. As we lined up along the lake's edge, Dad eased out onto the snow-covered ice. "Dad, be careful," I shouted. "Don't fall in," David screamed. I grabbed Christy's mitted hand and squeezed. "What's wrong?" she whispered. "I'm scared," I replied. As the reality suddenly dawned on me, my dad can't swim. Jackie Jr. twisted the cord attached to his sled. David, Candy, and Willie stepped closer to the edge of the lake. Dad went further out. The ice crackled beneath his feet. He took another step, then cleared the snow from his path with a shovel. From the cleared spot, he was able to tell how thick the ice was. Before he placed one big foot in front of the other, he tapped the ice with his broomstick, testing it for weaknesses or cracks. Tap, tap, tap. Dad took a few steps forward. Tap, tap, tap. Then he took a few more steps. But just as he was about to pronounce the ice safe, boom! A terrible noise roared from below the ice. "Dad!" I shrieked. I was sure the ice was going to open up and swallow him. Jackie Jr. stood ready to shove his sled to Dad. David, Candy, and Willie inched closer to my brother. We waited for what seemed like forever. I was in a school recently in Phoenix, and I had 3 different classes, you know, and I had the little ones in the middle of the middle school and then high school. So I read that, and I stopped right there, and the little ones all looked at me. And then finally I went into question and answer, and so here goes this hand right up front. "Well, are there a lot of pages left to the book?" So I said, "Oh, you want me to finish?" But you see, Harvell did that for us. He read the last page, so I'm not cheating you. I missed a page or two. Questions? Yes.
If you hold on and just wait for Mike, we'll get to you.
Okay.
Right there.
Well, we're so glad you're here, Miss Robinson.
Thank you.
And your father's brought some great memories in baseball, but also, you know, what he's done in society.
Yes.
I've got a 2-part question. First of all, if you remember as a young lady what it was like to be around Newcomb and Junior Gilliam, and Campanella, those people brought some great memories. And my second part is, especially you're working in baseball, is, you know, one of the big issues today is young African Americans going into baseball. Mm-hmm. There's been a big decline.
Right.
And what do you see? What are some things that can be done to bring that back?
Okay. First part, my memories of being around the old-timers from childhood are certainly there, but they're sort of, I've been in baseball now for 14 years, so, you know, I traveled with Joe Black, I traveled with Buck O'Neill, you know, I mean, I see them all of the time, so they're sort of mixed up now with childhood, and, you know, to tell you the truth, what I remember from my father playing baseball those years, I remember going to Florida for spring training. And I remember going to Florida because it was cold in Connecticut, and when I learned to swim. you know, because they had a swimming pool at the motel. So my baseball stories are all mixed up with what people have told me, and because my father wasn't one to come home and brag about all and talk. He didn't want to keep talking about his baseball years. When he retired from baseball, he moved on. He wanted to talk about. We all watched baseball on television. We went to some games, but he was more interested in politics and the civil rights movement, and that's what we talked about as a family. Second part was yes. The whole integration process took about 14 years for every team in Major League Baseball to have black players on the team. And we're not just talking about African Americans, we're talking, it was a color barrier that separated the Negro Leagues from Major Leagues. So it was Hispanics, anybody with brown skin. So once we started moving and integrating, that whole process took 14 years, with the last team being, anybody know? Who do you think? Red Sox. And interestingly enough, they were the first team to get the option to sign Jackie Robinson. There was a fake, tryout where they had no intention of hiring him, and it was set up by a sports writer, Wendell Smith. And they took him up there. My father tried out, and he did very well, but they said they had no, it was just pretend. So they were the last team. So today we have fully integrated teams. The problem got pointed out in the 60th anniversary that where it looks like we're fielding these really mixed teams, and there's a lot of African Americans on it as well because they're brown skinned people, that our numbers had dropped from 24% down to like 10%, and we were concerned it would go even further. So what do we do about it? There are lots of things that have happened. Some were happening before the 60th anniversary, some started happening afterwards, and the response has been on community level where they've really reached out and tried to bring black kids into their local Little League. We have an RBI league with Major League Baseball, so all of those were making some effort to reach out to those kids. There are many people have written to me and written to my mother and talking about what they're doing in the community where they're really trying to change that picture. And then baseball has done things like not only have baseball academies in Latin America, we now have baseball academies in Compton. We're going to have one in Atlanta, Houston. There'll probably be one in Florida. And all of those baseball academies do make an extra effort to try to attract African Americans. It's not easy. I have a son who is 6'4", 200, and now he's 217. But he didn't want to touch baseball. He was much more into basketball, and then he went into football. And that's what he played through high school. So we're in a very fast-moving culture. And so basketball, where you don't need a lot of space, and you see the players are so visible in basketball, so kids know these players, they know how much money they're making. They feel like they can reach that goal. So anyway, it's a lot of competition, a lot of options of entertainment. So we're working on it on a lot of levels. I have a program that I do which is school-based. It's called Breaking Barriers in Sports and Life, and we've reached now about 20 million children over the 14 years. It's not a baseball program per se, but all the activities are baseball themed, and it's all about overcoming obstacles. And kids write about we have a national essay contest. This year we got 9,200 essays from kids all over the country. And they write about a barrier or obstacle they've had to overcome. Now they also, in the curriculum, they have baseball players talking about values and Jackie Robinson or barriers that they've had to overcome. So we get baseball in. So there's lots of different ways to approach it. How are you all doing down here with that? Not good. Okay.
Bob, at the
Yes.
back.
Thank you. We're glad that you're here.
Thank you.
You shared your life story with us. I imagine there are a number of baseball enthusiasts in this crowd. All of us who think we're baseball people also think it is the ultimate team sport.
I agree.
Every baseball coach I ever had, and in my years of coaching, I used the same story that I heard. I'm going to repeat it, and then I'd like to hear from the source how true the story really is.
Okay.
In the display of building teamwork, the story that I always heard was that in the early years when your dad was on the Dodgers in spring training, there were some places in Florida, some motels when they traveled that wouldn't let him sleep in the motel, and he had to sleep in the bus. And the story goes that Pee Wee Reese and some of the other Dodgers would go sleep on the bus with your dad as a show of solidarity or teamwork. It was a great story.
That's a great story.
It sounds like fabulous.
Make a nice book.
I would love to know from how much you've heard of that story and then the truth of it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Actually, I have not heard that particular story. Have you? It's a very nice story. We should write it. We have to make sure it says it's fiction. No, but it is very important. You know, my father got on the team, and Branch Rickey, when he was first brought onto the team, many of the players said, I won't play with him. Because many of them were Southern, grown up in the South, and they had to go back to their communities, and they weren't ready for integration either. So Branch Rickey said fine, and he sent word down through the manager that said, fine, if you don't want to play with Jackie Robinson, you can come and we will reassign you to another team. So from the ownership right away took a hard line that Jackie Robinson's going to play on this team, and you might as well get used to it. Now, still they weren't happy about it, so he had to, where he was part of the team on the field, he wasn't part of the team. And he did live separately from them. When they would travel together, they would play cards, and they wouldn't include him in it. I mean, just simple things, but, you know, they really kept things separate. So what happened at a game, there were a number of things that happened to sort of change that picture. One is, like, my father became a valuable member of the team, and I think it's, you know, one of the things he proved is, you know, I can help you win games. The other thing, what happened at a specific game was the crowd was sort of, it was before the game had started, and the crowd was jeering at Jackie Robinson, trying to rattle him, and then they turned to start jeering at Pee Wee Reese, because Pee Wee Reese was captain of the team. He was from Louisville, right. Sorry. I will make up names. I told everybody I was coming to Alabama. I'm going, wait a minute, Bill Clinton's not from Alabama. So I knew it was an A word. I was just, my brain was rattled. My son said, Mom, do not get there and say you're in Alabama. I said, Jesse, I know where I'm going now. I was just like, you know, until I got ready to travel, I don't pay attention. But anyway, so Pee Wee Reese sort of ignored the name calling that coming out of the stands, now directed at him, and walked over to Jackie Robinson, who was at first base, and they talked. Now, this is where the story gets all confused. Some have them Pee Wee wrapping his arm around him. Some have Pee Wee's hand on his shoulder. But what Pee Wee and my father used to say was that neither of them remember what was said. It was just the fact that he walked over to him that it silenced the crowd. Now again, Pee Wee Reese is the team captain, so that sends a signal again from the top. So you've got Branch Rickey and the managers, now you've got the captain of the team saying, I'm going to play with him, he's my teammate. So it was sort of, you know, it changed, but no, they did not, and my father didn't sleep on a bus. Branch Rickey arranged for him to sleep in homes of families in the community, black families in the communities they were traveling in. Sometimes they had a whole circuit of Negro, they called them back then Negro, but they're black-owned motels where the entertainers and the athletes stayed. So they sort of had their own, they'd meet up with each other at different motels. So that's really how it worked. Yes? None of the children?
Appreciate
You
it.
guys got to, children, don't be intimidated. You can ask a question. Yes.
I was curious. I read a book about the first season of your dad's career with the Dodgers. His first game, he faced an Arkansan, Johnny Sane. And one thing I was wanting to get your thoughts about that, I had read where Johnny Sane was pressured, not just from the Boston Braves teammates they had, but also from a lot of people around baseball to throw at your dad, but he wouldn't throw at your dad in that game. And I was wondering if you'd heard about that, and also if your dad and Johnny Sane ever talked about that to your knowledge.
Not to my knowledge. I think it probably came out more later on when the books were written that focused just on that first year. But yeah, there were players that were instructed to, pitchers that were instructed to try to purposely hit him. In fact, we have one book, photo in my book, not Testing the Ice, Promises to Keep. It shows the whole sequence of when the pitcher purposely knocks him down. And same thing with the spiking. There was one, when my father got to Philadelphia, he was greeted by the manager of the Philadelphia Phillies holding his bat like a machine gun. And all of his players held their bat like a machine gun. So, I mean, that stuff was really serious, you know, along with the death threats. But we didn't hear necessarily about the ones who had a conscience and didn't go along with it as much. So it's good to know, isn't it? Yes. Yes.
Right here in the middle.
Did your dad comment much about the book, The Boys of Summer? Did he feel like that was a fairly accurate portrayal? How did he feel about that?
Yes, he did. Yes, Roger Kahn. And Roger Kahn was at our house I knew Roger Kahn growing up. And my father was not the most social of people. He really did like his 6 acres, and he acted like he was protecting us, but he was protecting himself as much. But Roger Kahn was one person that did, you know, people often ask him, were they good buddies? I'm like, good buddies to me means they came over for dinner, you know. But Roger Kahn did come to the house. So no, he respected Roger Kahn's work. And he did another book, a couple of books after that too, yeah.
Todd.
Hi, I'm Todd Moore. I'm a clinical student. I want to say thank you for coming out tonight. Really appreciate you sharing your book. I have, it's odd that you're here because me and my wife when there's a newborn that's born out there that they send us invitations or whatnot to a baby shower or whatnot. We always give your book.
Oh.
So it was very fortunate that you're here.
Oh,
but I want to ask a question about social commentary, but I'm not going to. I'm really interested in your stories. You really struck me as such a great storyteller about your father. So will you tell us a story, your favorite story your father told you, and then maybe your favorite story that you've heard after he passed away?
Oh, wow. This is when my mind goes blank. Favorite story he told me. Well, I actually have my next book coming out is one of the favorite stories I heard growing up. It's and again, it was a favorite story, and I never thought about writing a book. It was actually an artist, a really great artist, E.B. Lewis, who asked me we were both at a book signing, and he said, is this story true? And I was like, yeah. He said, well, that would make a great children's book. And I'm like, oh, would it? And he said, yes. And I said, well, let me look into it. Anyway, this is a story in 1948, my parents moved into Brooklyn because they were living in New York his first year. They moved into Brooklyn. They moved into a two-story house, a two-family house, and it was in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. And so this story that I've heard, I always heard it from the adult's perspective. So Sarah, who is still a lifelong friend, she's now 91. She and my father were the same age. Sarah and her family lived a couple of doors down, and they heard that that a black family had bought this house, and there was a petition that went around. Some of the families didn't want a black family to move in. And Sarah's position and her husband's position was, here our parents immigrated from Russia trying to escape persecution, and we're not going to then turn around and do that to somebody else. So she refused, and she thought they were crazy for even having this petition. My parents move in, because they didn't know my parents were going to be renting the second half of this house. And my father's a big star in Brooklyn. So they move into this neighborhood, and Steve, who is the little boy in the story, his hero moves into the neighborhood. Anyway, they get to know the family, get to know Steve, because his hero has moved in. Christmas time comes around, and Steve's over our house helping to help to decorate the tree. So my father says, is your tree up? And Steve says, well, we don't have a tree. So my father and mother go, geez, I wonder why I don't have a tree. I wonder, is it finances, or what is the problem? And here's Christmas Eve. So Steve leaves. My father goes out and buys Steve a tree. Takes it to the Satlow house, Steve's mother answers the door. Now, she's never met Jackie Robinson before. She met Rachel, but not Jackie. And so she doesn't know what to say. So she goes, that's very thoughtful, and nice to meet you, and takes the tree and brings it into the house and is staring at it when her husband comes home. And he goes, what is this tree doing in my house? And, you know, I can't tell you the end, how it ends, because then then I can't read the book when it comes out. But that was one of my favorite stories. But when it came time for me actually to tell this story as a picture book, I went to Sarah and I heard her side of it. I asked my mother and I heard her side of it. But I wanted to hear what it was like for Steve. So I went and interviewed Steve. And Steve is now, he was a surgeon who became a cattle farmer in Florida. So I went up to had lunch with Steve and brought my tape recorder. And it was just like he was a little boy again telling the story. And it was so cool that I made the book. So it's all done in Steve's perspective. Now, in terms of what people have told me about my father, I have heard some of the most beautiful stories. And if you forgive me if I can't think of one specifically, but the thing that moves me the most is people literally cry when they tell me the story. And it's not only Jackie Robinson, it's what Jackie Robinson what they associate with Jackie Robinson. So how important he was to their father and how their father shared the story. Or it could be an aunt or a grandfather, or going to the, so those are my favorite stories, and I've really heard some real emotional ones. And people cry when they meet me, or shaking, and because they're feeling like they're having some connection to the story that was told to them over the years from their father or whatever. Thank you.
We have time for one more.
Hello, Ms. Robinson. It's good to see you again. We actually met about 12 years ago at a reception in a private home in Atlanta, Georgia. My now husband. And you signed this for me.
Yes.
And you also
Linda
signed...
Moffat and...
Absolutely.
Linda
Moffat and her husband.
Yes.
But you also signed one for my grandfather, who was a Dodgers fan, who
Okay.
loved Jackie Robinson. My grandfather could not read, but I took him this book.
Okay.
And to see your handwriting in the book, you would never know what that meant to him. So I'm here to see you, and what took you so long to write the children's book? Because you talk about it on the back of this book.
Well, no, wait a minute. That came out in 1996.
Exactly.
Then I went to head of work. So my next book came out in 2001. So it wasn't a terrible long time. And then I've been doing one, listen, I've caught up, okay? So I do one every year. Actually, I'm stumbling. I have a real problem right now with my novel. And it has nothing to do with writer's block. I know exactly what I want the novel to be about, and I've been writing it for a year. But I have to tell you, I have another connection to Bill Clinton, and it's not one I'm very happy about. I had open heart surgery a year and a half ago. And I'm sitting there watching Bill Clinton go back and have his stent put in, going, I've noticed I've been having trouble walking up those steps. And 4 weeks ago, I'm in the hospital with thinking I had a heart attack. I never have had a heart. I've been very blessed. I've never had a heart attack. I had a very weird little bitty pain right here that my doctor recognized, along with the fact that I felt my body decompensating. So I don't know why I'm telling you this. Now, that has nothing to do with why I wrote children's book. But anyway, 4 weeks ago, I think it's why I just have so much happening. And that's why I thought I was going to Alabama, because my mind has just been so confused. But I was happy that they were so public about Bill Clinton. I remember saying, boy, he must have a more serious case than I have. And here I am 4 weeks ago. Thank you. Oh, do you? Oh, perfect. All right.
Well we appreciate you coming to Arkansas.